Over 9 years into Dead by Daylight, and there's one element of the game that consistently creates discussions and controversies, and the element I'm referring to is the pallet. But over 9 years into Dead by Daylight, and the discussions and controversies about pallets are almost always focused on the density and distribution of them. The most recent patches are a perfect example of this. The pallet density update has swung back and forth and back and forth, but after patch 9.3.2, most pallets have essentially returned to their pre-pallet density positioning. I'm personally torn on how pallets should be handled moving forward. On one hand, the state of pallets today is nowhere close to how strong they were years ago. But on the other hand, I do understand and agree that there are some legitimate concerns with how some maps or pallet loops are designed. And then there's the consideration of individual killers and how strong they are, and that just creates a messier situation. And truthfully, after the constant back and forth with pallets, from the whiplash patches to the developer communications to the killer versus survivor discussions, it has all become tiring. But then I started to think about why the conversation about pallets has become so repetitive and stale. After over 9 years, the standard pallet has only received a couple of cosmetic changes, and really that's about it. And after 9 years, what else is really left to change regarding pallet loops without it causing too much disparity? The pallet density update once again serves as a perfect example, and the whiplash the following updates have created just leaves players feeling frustrated. So instead of focusing so much on pallet density and distribution, surely it's time for some pallet innovation of some kind, right? And then I wondered, why not introduce new types of pallets? Well, let's look at the pallet variety we currently have. There's the standard pallet, fragile pallets, chemical trap pallets, and the newly introduced frozen pallets. While it's great that in recent years we've seen an uptick in different kinds of pallets, both the amounts of new pallet types and the new effects they offer are mediocre at best. Fragile pallets are better than nothing in dire situations, but being forced to play for a stun to make them useful isn't all that great. It's a high-risk, mediocre reward in most scenarios. Chemical trap pallets are a step in the right direction, but a killer can just wait out the timer for the trap to expire. The frozen pallets sound interesting in theory, but they don't offer the interactive gameplay that feels rewarding as a survivor or killer. So given the lack of new pallet types and the mediocre impacts they provide, I'd argue we're overdue for some true pallet innovation. I'm sure with more time for brainstorming and also understanding what is and is not possible, there are a myriad of ideas that could be tested for new pallets, but I did come up with a few ideas for new pallet types while also keeping in mind what is currently possible in the game given the current bandwidth the devs are given. So here's a few examples of the pallet types I was thinking of. Pallets that are heavier and weigh more essentially, so they lead to a slightly longer stun duration and or take longer to kick. These could be placed mostly at filler loops to make them worth running to as a survivor and not nearly as overpowered on the stronger loops. Pallets that give the killer some sort of temporary status effect. Think something along the lines of residual manifest giving blindness or chemical traps hinder. These would likely require the survivors to spend time setting up the effects to keep things fair. Pallets that offer a high risk, high reward system. An example of this could be a survivor uses a pallet but they suffer from exhaustion as a result, and a killer can break the pallet, but it reveals their aura for some time. Again, these are just some rough ideas. I'd certainly hope there would be new effects that could be created specifically for new pallet types. And one concern with all of this that does come to mind is behavior's dedication to tying almost every new interaction to a perk. While new pallet perks along these lines would be interesting, I'm more suggesting new core pallet mechanics that everyone can interact with no perks required. You could then have perks that impact these new mechanics if you really wanted to go down that route. It's possible that dishing out new palette types and effects could just create more of a balancing nightmare. I do recognize this. But the goal with new palette types would be to evolve the looping and chasing experience so that players aren't always asking how many pallets are there and how strong are the loops. And instead they might start asking what types of pallets are there and where would it be best to run. There would still be normal pallets too, but just having a few more pallet types that can spawn could refresh the looping and chasing experience so much. And obviously changes like this would require lots of testing, which would be a perfect way to reform how the PTB currently operates. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you like the idea of new palette types? Or is it better to just stick with the classic palette formula we know? I'm not entirely opposed to keeping things the same, but I would like to see at least an attempt to innovate palettes in some way. The palette density and distribution stuff is all fine and dandy to an extent, but the somewhat half-assed approach with it all and the ramifications that followed were both unsurprising and also a bit of a wake-up call on the current state of pallets. If nothing else, I hope the pallet density changes are put on the back burner for at least a little while. That's all I have for now though. Thanks for watching.